I want to go back to something you said in there about, any publicity is good publicity. That used to kind of be a rule, but now it's like I wonder, how do you predict who is going to go get the mob angry by saying the wrong thing and become famous for it, and who is going to get the mob angry and become destroyed and shunned and blacklisted for it? Because a lot of people have gone the latter route, where it costs them dearly, kind of thing. But then a few people have built careers out of nowhere and ascended into the stardoms of fame from pissing off the mob, such as Jordan Peterson.
That is an
How do you
interesting
know?
thing. So I think some of it is, some of it perhaps could be ascribed to depth, because ultimately, if all you have to offer is outrage, that's gonna consume you, and you're gonna be washed away by the waves of said outrage, most likely. So perhaps having more to, I guess, having outrage as the end goal is probably a bad call, whereas having it be a means to an end could perhaps be a strategic move to projectile oneself into the public sphere, which I suppose is one way of describing what Peterson did.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I think you do have to have the integrity to stick to your message and your values as well when they come for you. You don't have to be necessarily hard-headed and be mean back to them, but you do have to make it clear to everyone what you stand for, and then hopefully the cards shake out in your favor because people will respect that. Like a Brett Weinstein, I'm thinking, as an example.
Right. Yeah, and then it is interesting how some people can saddle up a certain type of thing and ride it like an expert surfer, ride the wave of public scrutiny, and others just wipe out and get, just get eaten up by it. And I guess I'm thinking like even something along the lines of, say, Kim Kardashian, right? Who really came on the scene as a result of a porn tape. How many people have been able to pull that off? Like, like that's not.
Yeah.
Whatever you think of her brand of entertainment and content, like the fact that she was able to use that as a launching pad into some kind of business empire, that in itself is displays an understanding of human psyche or public perception or something to that effect that I think is quite shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think of Trump as an interesting example too. I haven't been able to really figure out, is he does he have this really overly sensitive, fragile ego, as a lot of people believe, or does he just not give a crap? Because I don't think he was always this sort of right-wing figure. I think he was a liberal traditionally, so he saw, and I don't know what he feels inside, but I think he saw an opportunity in the media moment a few years ago, that like a niche in the market that was untapped for a certain type of right-wing populism. He adopted it, and it worked for him, and he knew how to use the media. But as a result, he's had to undergo like some of the most vicious hatred from media and from the public in general, or at least a big portion of the public, who try to define him as some of the worst things that you can be. And just to face that onslaught, and he doesn't seem to care. Like, he doubles down in all his positions. He at no point has really cowered from that. And And I don't think he needed to take any of this on. He chose to do it. I don't even think it's really his fundamental beliefs, but he doesn't seem to quake with fear when he imagines that history might end up defining him as some kind of Nazi.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how you do that, because it seems rather alarming to me to have half of society defining you in that way.
Yeah, but he's also, like there's also something that he stands up for. Um, so it's again, like you could argue that hasn't always been his position or his set of beliefs, but right now he is actually speaking to a contingent of people in a very authentic way, and it's resonating, and it's impressive in its own right. So it's
Yeah. Yeah, his poll numbers are apparently higher than ever right now.
really.
And so he knows that, despite, like, most of the media attacks him in the worst ways, paints him in the worst ways, but he seems to understand that that doesn't represent the public sentiment, that still a solid portion of the country agrees with what he says. So he's able to hear what the media says and then put it in its context, which is, well, that doesn't mean that's what everyone thinks. And he's right about that.
Yeah. Well, and he's, like people get upset because he's sort of like often intentionally inflammatory and somewhat uh, pushy, and he does a lot of things that wouldn't be considered good manners, let's say. But by the same token, it is these are effective strategies of advancing his agenda, and I wonder how. Yeah, like, I mean, I think it is a good question. Like, how will the history look upon his presidency? Because right now he's standing up to a lot of scrutiny, but also, I don't know, like, I don't know that much about history of American presidencies, but I imagine that there were other presidents who are now looked upon favorably who had to put up with a lot of public pressure in their day and do unpopular things. Even if, because like even if only like 20% of the country doesn't like what you're doing, like that can feel like a lot. And arguably with Trump, it's more than that. Uh, but uh, but yeah, like I mean, it's certainly he seems to be considerably more um, polarizing than someone like Obama, for example. But I wonder
Yeah.
if he is as unpopular as it gets, because there were
Well,
difficult times in the country before, and people had very different ideas of how to make it move forward. And
I think yeah, I think he actually has an unprecedented level of support for this point in his presidency in
yeah,
time. I think his support is supposedly like higher than most presidents at this point, maybe even all. I don't know. I don't want to be quoted on that, but regardless, like how history remembers him, it's gonna be so hard to predict, because we're going through an information revolution right now. So, like the printing press, we don't even really know what the world is going to look like as a result of the social media revolution and how history is recorded. But typically, like, history is written by the winners. So, if the factions that don't like Trump become dominant in the future, they will write him as this bad person. But I think they'll dial it down, because right now, like, the rhetoric is so intense. Like, he's essentially a white supremacist. I don't think the nation is going to be comfortable recording in the past, looking back on the history and saying, oh yeah, and we had one president who is a white supremacist, who was like the equivalent to someone in Germany in World War II. I think they'll dial it down just at least for the sake of their own national psyche. Like we're seeing things in the moment right now that are at their most intense. And I don't think it's going to go in the history book in that form, because that just sounds crazy.
Yeah, man.